Let's start from the bad and slowly move up to the most horrifying methods of torture to ever exist. Number 8. Rat torture. Rats. They're annoying enough when they're just raiding your pantry, but who knew these little creatures were recruited for one of history's most brutal methods of torture? For centuries, rats have been weaponized in ways that are truly the stuff of nightmares. One of the earliest recorded uses of rat torture dates back to ancient Rome, when Emperor Nero reportedly used rats to punish political enemies. But it wasn't just the Romans. Rat torture made a comeback during the Dutch Revolt in the 16th century, when Dutch rebels reportedly used this terrifying method on Spanish prisoners. Talk about historical pest control. Here's how it worked. Victims would be placed in an enclosed space with dozens of rats, either in a metal container or a specifically designed cage. That might sound bad, but the real horror began when the torturers got creative. To make the rats aggressive, they'd heat the container. Imagine a medieval microwave, or starve the rats for days. Once they were hungry enough, those rats wouldn't wait long before they saw the victim as dinner. The Dutch weren't alone in using this tactic. In the 17th century, reports of rat torture emerged in China, where similar methods were employed to punish prisoners or extract confessions. These little furballs, usually more interested in nibbling on cheese, suddenly turned into vicious biting machines, with their razor-sharp front teeth doing all the damage. And we all know how charming rats can be. If you've ever thought rats were harmless, try sharing a small cage with 25 or 30 of them, all of them ravenous and ready to gnaw their way through flesh and bone. Things really took a turn for the worse if the rats hadn't eaten in a while. Starving rats go from snackers to savage fast. The victims would end up with deep puncture wounds and, here's the kicker, an entirely new appreciation for those old Tom and Jerry cartoons. But physical pain wasn't the only weapon in the rat's arsenal. The psychological trauma was just as devastating. Imagine going from thinking of rats as annoying pests to seeing them as the agents of your own demise. The fear and shock were often enough to break even the strongest of wills. In fact, historical records show that many victims would beg for mercy long before the rats even began their feast. And if that wasn't bad enough, most victims of this gruesome method didn't get much of a chance to reflect. They usually ended up screaming and thrashing, trying to escape, which only made the rats think, oh, they're playing hard to get, and attack even harder. It's a brutal cocktail of fear, pain, and helplessness. And sometimes the rats wouldn't stop until there was literally nothing left to chew on. Death by horde of ravenous ratatouilles. Number 7, the Spanish donkey. Forget the elegant-sounding name. There's nothing fun or fancy about the Spanish donkey. In fact, this device is more nightmare fuel than a fun ride for anyone unlucky enough to experience it. The Spanish donkey was a method of torture widely used in Spain during the 16th and 17th centuries. At a time when public punishments were popular, this device wasn't just about inflicting pain, it was a spectacle. A show of power for rulers who wanted to keep their subjects in line. After all, nothing says, I'm in charge, quite like a wooden donkey with a cruel streak. So, what is this Spanish donkey exactly? Picture a wooden horse or donkey, but instead of a comfy saddle, it has a sharp, triangular edge running down its back. And that's where the fun begins. Victims were forced to sit astride this thin, sharp edge. Already painful enough, right? But wait, it gets worse. To make sure the experience was truly unforgettable, the torturers would attach weights to the victim's legs. Gravity did the rest of the work, slowly pulling the victim down deeper into the edge. You can imagine the kind of damage this did to, well, their most sensitive areas. The Spanish donkey wasn't just about causing pain, it was about making it last. You see, the weights ensured that the victim's suffering was prolonged, with the sharp edge cutting deeper the longer they were forced to stay on the device. Movement only made the wounds worse, so victims were trapped in a slow, agonizing ordeal. This form of torture was especially popular during the Spanish Inquisition. Yep, the same Inquisition that gave us all kinds of creative torture techniques, because nothing says religious reform like forcing people to sit on a sharp wooden donkey. As if the pain wasn't enough, the Spanish donkey also came with a side of public humiliation. These executions weren't hidden away in dark dungeons. They were public events. Townspeople would gather to watch the spectacle, often with kids and families in tow. Now imagine the scene. You're balanced on the sharp back of this donkey, weights pulling you down, your legs shackled. All the while, the crowd is watching you suffer, probably enjoying it like it's the 16th century equivalent of live entertainment. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. Because the longer you sat there, the deeper the edge cut, making any hope of relief impossible. The weight would cause severe injuries to the legs and groin, often leading to permanent damage, or worse. The Spanish donkey didn't just break the body, it broke the spirit. Victims were left in agonizing pain, and any attempt to move only increased their suffering. And because medieval torture was all about maximizing the experience, this method was sometimes used for interrogation, ensuring that confessions would be dragged out as long as possible. In short, the Spanish donkey was a masterclass in how to make someone suffer for as long as humanly possible. Painful, humiliating, and public. It checked all the boxes for medieval torture. And let's face it, if you saw your neighbor being strapped to one of these, you'd probably rethink any plans to speak out against authority. So next time you hear about a donkey ride, just remember, it wasn't always the fun, child-friendly activity you're used to. Some rides were unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Number 6, the breaking wheel. The breaking wheel, or as some called it, the Catherine wheel, medieval Europe's twisted take on a carnival ride. Except this one didn't end with a stuffed animal or a photo of you screaming mid-ride. No. This ride left you wishing you'd never bought a ticket in the first place. Picture it, a massive wooden wheel. But instead of spinning for fun, the only thing spinning here is the unfortunate soul strapped to it. And instead of a gentle breeze in your face, you get a nice sledgehammer smashing your bones. It was kind of like whack-a-mole. Except, well, you were the mole. This device became popular in medieval Europe, especially in places like France and Germany. And why not? Back then, executions weren't just a way to deliver justice, they were a full-on public event. The breaking wheel wasn't just about punishment, it was about putting on a show. The victim was tied to the wheel, arms and legs spread out, like some kind of medieval starfish. Then the executioner would swing a heavy sledgehammer, methodically breaking the bones in the arms, legs, and, well, pretty much anywhere they felt like. They were precise, too. The goal was to break every bone while keeping the victim alive for as long as possible. Because clearly, mercy wasn't on the job description. And of course, the crowd loved it. People gathered for hours, sometimes days, to watch this suffering unfold. And if the victims somehow survived all the bone breaking, well, don't get too excited. After the smashing, they were often left tied to the wheel, baking in the sun. Rescue wasn't on the menu either. It was pretty much illegal to help anyone off early. You see, back in the Middle Ages, it wasn't just about making sure criminals got what they deserved. It was about showing everyone else what happens when you break the rules. Murderers, robbers, even heretics sometimes found themselves face to face with the wheel. And for those lucky enough to make it to the top of the medieval naughty list, there was no better example than Peter Neers. Peter Neers was a German serial killer in the late 1500s, accused of over 500 murders. Yeah, not exactly a guy you'd want as your neighbor. After his capture, Neers got the VIP treatment, 42 bone-crushing hits from the sledgehammer before they finally dismembered him. If that's not the worst way to clock out of life, I don't know what is. It's safe to say the breaking wheel wasn't the kind of experience you walked away from. In fact, you didn't walk away at all. The breaking wheel, proof that sometimes it's not the fall that kills you, it's the landing. In this case, the sledgehammer. Number 5, the Judas Cradle. The name alone gives it all away, the Judas Cradle. And no, it's not a cozy little rocker for babies. It's a device designed to betray your body, your dignity, and pretty much your will to live. It was one of the go-to methods of torture during the good old days of medieval Europe, particularly in Spain and Italy. Yes, the Inquisition loved this one. Because why settle for a slap on the wrist when you can break someone, body and soul? While most torture devices of the time were all about full-body torment, the Judas Cradle decided to be a little more focused. It zeroed in on a very specific and sensitive area of the body. You can probably guess what's coming, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it anyway. First, the victim was tied up in a humiliatingly awkward position, with their hands and feet bound, leaving all their delicate bits fully exposed. Then came the main event, the cradle itself, a pyramid-shaped metal contraption with a sharp, pointy top, almost as if someone thought, let's take a regular seat and make it as nightmarishly uncomfortable as humanly possible. The victim was then slowly lowered onto this sharp point, genital first. Yes, you heard that right. As the weight of the body pressed down, the pain was nothing short of excruciating. In fact, it probably made getting kicked in the nuts feel like a gentle tap on the shoulder. For men, the risk was as obvious as it was horrifying. Their family jewels stood no chance. Women didn't fare any better, suffering from deep ruptures that were equally brutal. And just to make sure no one was left out, for some unlucky victims, the point was aimed at the backside. Because why not spread the pain around? And naturally, trying to squirm away from this torture? Huge mistake. The more you moved, the more damage you did. So most victims did their best to stay as still as possible, which, let's face it, wasn't much of a comfort either. Here's the thing, gravity is not your friend. Over time, even staying still wasn't enough. Gravity would slowly pull the body further down onto the point, increasing the pain with every passing moment. So standing still, it became the most agonizing experience of all. The Judas Cradle was a popular tool for getting confessions in medieval Europe, especially during the Spanish Inquisition. People would confess to anything just to make the pain stop, whether they were guilty or not. And honestly, who wouldn't crack under the pressure of being slowly torn apart by a metal pyramid? Judas Cradle turned every second into pure agony. It was medieval Europe's twisted way of saying, you're not going anywhere, and neither is your sanity. Number 4, the Pear of Anguish. Ah, Spain. Known for its vibrant culture, delicious tapas, and, oh yes, the Pear of Anguish. Now, if you're imagining a juicy piece of fruit ready to be enjoyed on a sunny afternoon, let me stop you right there. This pear wasn't for eating. This pear was for making you regret every single life choice that led you to that moment. Shaped like a pear, small enough to fit in your hand, but designed with one purpose, to make you wish you'd been born in a different century. Think of it as the medieval version of a dentist's worst tool, but with a much nastier sense of humor. The torturer would insert this pear-shaped contraption into the victim's mouth, or, other personal areas when they were feeling particularly creative. Once inserted, they'd start turning a key at the end. And, well, you could say this was the medieval key of death. As they turned it, the pear's sharp metal petals would slowly begin to open. You might think of a blooming flower, except this one's blossoming inside your body. And the petals? Yeah, those are made of pure, unadulterated agony. The more they turned the key, the wider the pear would open, turning your insides into minced meat. It wasn't just a device of pain, it was a full-on exercise in regret. Victims likely spent a good amount of time reflecting on why they didn't choose to be a monk or some other career that didn't involve sharp metal objects inside their body. But hey, why stop at just one pear when you can double the fun? Some unlucky souls got the double feature. One pear for the mouth and another pear for, well, let's just say it was strategically placed. And if you were wondering what kind of people got the honor of experiencing this charming device, it was often used to punish sex offenders. Instead of a slap on the wrist, they handed out a pear in the worst way possible. This was particularly popular during medieval times in Spain and Italy, where the idea of public humiliation played a big role in law enforcement. Nothing says teachable moment like watching someone get a pear where no pear should ever go. After an encounter with the Pear of Anguish, let's just say that sitting comfortably, or eating for that matter, wasn't going to be an option for a while. Or being alive, really. It's safe to say that after an encounter with this delightful device, you'd be reconsidering all your life choices. the Pear of Anguish, proving that even the smallest objects can cause the biggest regrets. And if you're wondering how to avoid one, well, back in those days, just don't offend anyone in power or get caught breaking the law. Easier said than done when your rulers thought public torture was prime entertainment. Number 3, the Iron Maiden. Ah, the Iron Maiden, one of the most iconic devices in the how much can we make someone regret their life choices category. This medieval horror show first made its terrifying debut in Europe during the Middle Ages, dreamed up by some sick genius who probably thought, hey, why not combine a coffin with a pincushion and see what happens? When rulers back then needed a quick confession or just wanted to ruin someone's day, they'd roll out the Iron Maiden. And why not? Stocks and a good old-fashioned flogging clearly weren't enough. They needed something that screamed, "You messed up," but with 1,000 sharp metal voices. So what's the deal with this spiky casket of doom? Well, imagine getting a hug. Wait, no, a bear hug from a cabinet full of nails. But instead of your mom's comforting embrace, you get a medieval massage that starts with a few pricks and ends with you wishing you'd never been born. You see, the real genius of the Iron Maiden lies in its commitment to prolonged suffering. On the outside, it looks like an upright coffin, but inside it's a different story. Instead of being lined with plush cushions, it's lined with sharp spikes that were strategically placed to avoid all those pesky vital organs. Why let you die right away? Where's the fun in that? Once you're inside and the doors slam shut, it's all over, but not really. It's all over except for the screaming, because those spikes are placed just so they won't kill you right away. Nope, they pierce all the bits that make you wish you could pass out. But medieval sadism had no room for an early exit. The goal wasn't to kill you quickly, it was to keep you alive, suffering, and fully awake for the whole excruciating experience. Can't have you dying too soon, after all. The Iron Maiden wasn't just physical torment, it was a psychological hell too. Imagine being trapped in a dark, spiked box, feeling every tiny movement drive those nails deeper while claustrophobia creeps in. Oh, and let's not forget the slow realization that death isn't coming quickly. It's creeping up on you at a snail's pace. If the pain didn't make you lose your mind, the claustrophobia certainly would. And where, you ask, was this delightful device most popular? Well, that gold star goes to Germany. Yup, apparently they decided if they were going to use the Iron Maiden, they were going to do it right. And they did. Often. So, pro tip, if you were living in medieval Germany, you might want to think twice about ticking off the local ruler, unless you were keen on ending up on the Iron Maiden's guest list. So next time you think you're having a bad day, just remember, at least you're not being hugged by a coffin full of spikes. It's the kind of massage that leaves you wishing for anything else, even a trip to the stocks. Number 2, the Brazen Bull. Ancient Greece. Beautiful architecture, groundbreaking philosophy, and some of the most nightmarish torture devices ever created. Seriously, if you were planning a vacation back then, you might want to reconsider. Between gladiator smackdowns and medieval procedures that could make you beg for a paper cut, the Greeks were definitely not messing around. And if you happened to be a criminal, they had a special kind of hospitality reserved just for you, the Brazen Bull. This wasn't your everyday torture device. This was ancient Greece's pièce de résistance in sadism. The Brazen Bull was the ultimate ancient version of tough love. And let's just say Perilos of Athens, the guy behind this bronze monstrosity, had a twisted sense of engineering. Imagine a life-sized metal oven shaped like a bull. The victim was placed inside, and once sealed, there was only one way out, as smoke. You see, the bull doubled as a slow-roasting oven, human flambe style. Think of it as a barbecue where the main course was, unfortunately, you. Perilos, in all his brilliance, designed it with one exclusive feature. Once you were inside, there was no escape. The torturers would light a fire underneath the bronze beast, and the metal would heat up, cooking the victim from the feet up. It's a shame they didn't offer a medium rare option, because, well, that bull wasn't designed for quick exits. As the heat intensified, the real nightmare kicked in. The victim's screams, oh yes, there would be screaming, were ingeniously designed to echo through the bull's head. So, instead of human cries for mercy, you'd hear what can only be described as the most deranged bovine concert ever. Perilous really went all in on making your final moments as theatrical as possible. But don't get too excited. There weren't exactly many success stories to come out of this bronze beauty. With no oxygen, extreme heat, and the unfortunate detail of being cooked alive, this was pretty much a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Death was agonizingly slow, making the Brazen Bull not just a death sentence, but a full-on performance of cruelty. Of course, once word got out about this DIY nightmare, it didn't take long for tyrants across the land to adopt it. None other than Emperor Nero, the gold medalist of ancient psychopaths, thought it was the perfect way to handle dissent. Early Christians, rebels, or anyone who happened to look at the emperor the wrong way were all candidates for the bull treatment. The combination of sadistic creativity and pure psychological torture made this one of the most terrifying ways to go. It was ancient Greece's contribution to the world of cruel and unusual punishment, proof that even civilizations known for philosophy and art weren't above a little extra heat. But in case you're wondering what happened to our friend Perilous, the brilliant mind behind this bronze beast, let's just say things didn't end well for him either. According to legend, Perilous was the first to experience his own creation, thrown into the bull by the very tyrant he'd hoped to impress. Talk about poetic justice, or in this case, roasted justice. Luckily for us, the Brazen Bull is just a dark chapter in history now, one that reminds us how far we've come. Sometimes you have to wonder what was going through Perilous's head when he came up with this. Maybe he just really hated beef, or maybe he was just, well, a little too creative for his own good. Number 1, the Blood Eagle. If you've ever wondered what the absolute pinnacle of human creativity looks like in terms of, let's say, creative cruelty, look no further than the Viking Blood Eagle. It's the kind of execution method that makes you question whether the people who came up with it were more into torture or art. Either way, it definitely takes the cake in the who thought this was a good idea department. The Blood Eagle wasn't your run-of-the-mill execution. No. This was the VIP treatment, reserved for only the absolute worst of the worst. Think of it as the Brazen Bull's even more sadistic cousin. The Vikings, known for their friendly neighborhood raids and charming hospitality, apparently believed that some people deserved a punishment so horrifying it made death look like a spa day. Well, it starts with a victim who by this point is probably rethinking every life decision they've ever made, tied face down. The real fun begins when their back is sliced open along the spine. Think of it as the world's first and worst attempted back surgery, courtesy of Viking ingenuity. Blood pours out like a Viking version of a waterfall, but hey, the Vikings weren't done. No, these guys were thorough. The ribs are carefully, if you can call it that, detached from the spine. And then the piece de resistance, the lungs are pulled out and spread across the victim's back like a pair of wings. Congratulations, you've got yourself a Blood Eagle. Minus the soaring through the sky part, of course. This is what happens when you mix surgery, art class, and a very, very bad day. The victim's back becomes a gruesome canvas, with their lungs on display like some twisted Viking art project. And naturally, this wasn't something the victims survived. But don't worry, they had plenty of time to reflect on their choices as they experienced a pain level that would make even the most sadistic dentist cringe. It's safe to say that nobody walked away from a Blood Eagle except, of course, the executioner, probably whistling while he washed off the blood. Now, why don't we see this charming tradition in today's society? Well, after a few centuries of reflection, scholars and pretty much anyone with a conscience decided that maybe turning someone's back into a gruesome art project wasn't exactly the pinnacle of civilization. Or maybe it's just that no one in the modern era has the stomach or the sheer lunacy to pull off something this grotesque. Let's be real. It probably has a lot to do with not wanting to clean up that kind of mess. Either way, we can all take a moment to be thankful that the Blood Eagle didn't make it past the Dark Ages.